The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across the therapy room floor. Sarah sat in the comfortable armchair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white from the pressure. She'd been sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes before finally gathering enough courage to walk through the door. The irony wasn't lost on her, being anxious about attending a therapy session for anxiety. But here she was, ready to face something that had been controlling her life for far too long. Dr. Martinez noticed the tension immediately as she settled into her own chair across from Sarah. The young woman's shoulders were practically touching her ears, and she kept glancing at the door as if calculating escape routes. This wasn't unusual for a first session, especially with someone dealing with social anxiety. The therapist had seen countless clients walk through that door carrying the same invisible weight, the same fear that somehow they would be judged even in this safe space. Dr. Martinez knew that Sarah's journey here had probably involved cancelling and rescheduling multiple times, each attempt bringing its own wave of dread. But the fact that she was here now spoke volumes about her readiness for change. If you enjoy this soothing CBT session, please like the video, subscribe to Mind Detox and ring the notification bell, and write in comments from which country you're watching this video. Sarah, Dr. Martinez began with a warm, gentle tone, I want you to know that this space is yours for the next hour. There's no right or wrong way to be here. Would you like to start by telling me what brought you in today? Sarah took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper when she spoke. I can't do it anymore. The constant worry about what people think of me. Last week, I had to give a presentation at work, and I called in sick instead. I sat in my car in the parking lot fully dressed, ready to go in, and I just couldn't. My boss is starting to notice, and I'm terrified I'll lose my job. But the thought of standing in front of all those people, having them look at me, judge me, it's paralyzing. The therapist nodded, maintaining steady, non-judgmental eye contact. That sounds incredibly difficult, Sarah. The fact that you made it to the parking lot shows tremendous effort, even if it doesn't feel that way to you. Can you tell me what thoughts were going through your mind as you sat in your car? Everything, Sarah replied, her voice gaining a bit more strength, that I'd stumble over my words, that they'd see my hands shaking, that they'd think I'm incompetent, that I don't deserve my position. I kept imagining their faces, disapproving, maybe even laughing. I know it sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but in that moment, it felt so real, so certain that it would happen. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. It doesn't sound ridiculous at all. These thoughts feel very real when we're experiencing them. What you're describing is something we call catastrophic thinking, when our mind jumps to the worst possible outcome and treats it as if it's definitely going to happen. Have you noticed this pattern in other areas of your life? Sarah's eyes widened slightly with recognition. Yes, actually. Even simple things like going to the grocery store. I'll need milk, and I'll spend an hour debating whether to go because what if I run into someone I know? What if I say something stupid? What if I'm wearing the wrong thing and people judge me? Sometimes I just order groceries online instead, even though it's more expensive. You're already showing great insight by recognizing these patterns, the therapist acknowledged. In cognitive behavioral therapy, we work with the understanding that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. When we have a thought like everyone will judge me, it creates feelings of anxiety and fear, which then leads to behaviors like avoidance. The more we avoid, the stronger the fear becomes. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Sarah shifted in her chair, seeming to relax slightly as she recognized her experience being validated. So how do we break the cycle? I've tried just telling myself to stop worrying, but that doesn't work. You're absolutely right that simply telling yourself to stop worrying doesn't work, Dr. Martinez confirmed. In fact, it often makes things worse because then we're anxious about being anxious. Instead, we're going to work on examining these thoughts more closely, challenging them with evidence, and gradually changing how you respond to social situations. Would you be willing to do a small exercise with me right now? Sarah nodded, though her hands tightened again slightly. Okay, the therapist continued, pulling out a notebook. Let's take that presentation situation. You said you were afraid everyone would judge you as incompetent. Let's examine that thought. First, what evidence do you have that supports this thought? Sarah thought for a moment. Well, I did mess up a presentation about 6 months ago. I forgot what I was going to say and had to look at my notes a lot. All right, and what happened after that presentation? Dr. Martinez asked. My colleague James said it was fine that everyone uses notes, but I think he was just being nice, Sarah replied. The therapist wrote this down. So one piece of evidence is a presentation where you used notes, and a colleague said it was fine. Now what evidence do you have that contradicts the thought that everyone thinks you're incompetent? Sarah frowned, thinking. I guess I did get promoted last year, and my performance reviews have been good. My boss actually said I'm detail-oriented and thorough in my work. Those are significant pieces of evidence, Dr. Martinez noted. A promotion and positive performance reviews suggest that your workplace values your contributions. Now let's think about this. Even if you did stumble over some words in a presentation, would that really mean you're incompetent at your entire job? When you put it that way, no, Sarah admitted. I guess I'm good at the actual work, just not at presenting. And even that belief might need examining, the therapist suggested gently. You mentioned one presentation where you used notes. Have there been others? Sarah considered this. Yes, actually. I've done maybe 5 or 6 over the past 2 years. The others went okay, I think. People asked questions afterward, seemed engaged. So out of 6 presentations, one involved using notes more than you wanted, and the others went well with engaged audiences. Does that match the story your anxiety's telling you? Dr. Martinez asked. Sarah actually smiled slightly. No, not really. My anxiety makes it seem like I'm terrible at all of them and everyone knows it. This is what we call cognitive distortion, the therapist explained. Your mind is taking one experience and generalizing it to everything, magnifying the negative and minimizing the positive. It's also engaging in mind reading, assuming you know what others are thinking without any real evidence. These patterns are incredibly common with social anxiety. It's weird, Sarah said. Talking about it like this makes it seem so obvious that my thoughts aren't accurate. But when I'm in the moment, they feel like absolute truth. Dr. Martinez nodded, understanding. That's because anxiety hijacks our rational thinking. It activates our fight or flight response, and our brain treats social judgment as if it's a physical threat. That's why your body responds with a racing heart, sweating, that feeling of wanting to escape. Your body is preparing to run from a tiger, except the tiger is the possibility that someone might form a negative opinion. So how do I convince my body there's no tiger? Sarah asked, leaning forward now, engaged in the conversation. Through a combination of strategies, the therapist replied. First, we'll continue working on identifying and challenging these thought patterns. I'll teach you to become your own detective, gathering evidence for and against your anxious thoughts. Second, we'll work on exposure, gradually facing social situations in a controlled way that allows you to build confidence and gather new evidence that contradicts your fears. Sarah's expression shifted to concern. Exposure sounds terrifying. It can feel that way, but we'll go at your pace, Dr. Martinez assured her. We'll create what we call a fear hierarchy, listing social situations from least to most anxiety-provoking. We might start with something small, like making eye contact with the cashier at the coffee shop, and gradually work up to bigger challenges. The key is that you're always in control of the pace. "What if I fail?" Sarah asked, the worry evident in her voice. "Let's examine that thought right there," the therapist suggested. "What would failure look like to you?" Sarah considered. "I guess. If I tried to make eye contact and couldn't, or if I had to leave the situation. And if that happened, what would it mean?" Dr. Martinez probed gently. "That I'm weak." "That I'll never get better." Sarah's voice grew quieter again. "Notice how your mind immediately jumps to these global permanent judgments," the therapist pointed out. "In reality, if you found something too challenging, it would simply mean we need to break it down into smaller steps. It's information, not failure. Every attempt teaches us something, even if it doesn't go as planned." Sarah seemed to consider this. "I never thought of it as information before. I always saw it as proof that something was wrong with me." "That's the social anxiety talking," Dr. Martinez explained. "It turns everything into evidence of inadequacy." "But let me ask you something. If your best friend came to you and said she couldn't make eye contact with a cashier because of anxiety, would you think she was weak?" "No," Sarah responded immediately. "I think she was brave for trying and dealing with something difficult." "So you can extend compassion to others but not to yourself," the therapist observed. "This is another pattern we'll work on, developing self-compassion. The critical voice in your head that judges you so harshly is actually maintaining your anxiety. When we're constantly criticizing ourselves, we're reinforcing the belief that others will criticize us too." Sarah nodded slowly. "I never made that connection before, but you're right. I'm my own worst critic. I say things to myself I would never say to another person." "Let's try something," Dr. Martinez suggested. "Can you think of a recent social situation where you felt judged?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Yesterday at the coffee shop. I was ordering, and I couldn't decide what I wanted. The line was growing behind me, and I just knew everyone was annoyed with me. I ended up ordering the first thing I saw just to get out of there." "Okay, let's work with this," the therapist said. "First, what were the actual facts of the situation? Just what happened without interpretation." "I was at the counter for maybe 30 seconds looking at the menu. There were 3 people behind me. I ordered a latte and left," Sarah listed. "Now what story did your anxiety tell you about those facts?" Dr. Martinez asked. "That everyone behind me was frustrated, that they thought I was wasting their time, that the barista was judging me for not knowing what I wanted," Sarah recounted. "And what evidence did you actually have for those thoughts?" the therapist probed. Sarah paused. "I guess none. No one said anything. No one sighed or made faces that I saw." "So your mind filled in the blanks with negative assumptions," Dr. Martinez noted. "Now let's consider alternative explanations. What else could have been true?" "Maybe the people behind me were looking at the menu too," Sarah suggested tentatively. "Maybe they were thinking about their own day, not about me at all." "Exactly," the therapist confirmed. "And even if someone was mildly annoyed, which we have no evidence for, would that really be catastrophic? Would it mean you're a bad person who doesn't deserve to take up space in the world?" Sarah actually laughed slightly. "When you say it like that, it sounds so extreme, but that's kind of how it feels in my head." "That's the anxiety magnifying everything," Dr. Martinez explained. "It takes a possibility, someone might be annoyed, and turns it into a catastrophe that defines your worth as a person. Part of our work will be learning to tolerate the possibility that sometimes people might have negative thoughts about us, and that's okay. It doesn't define us, and it's not actually dangerous." That's hard to imagine, Sarah admitted. The idea of someone thinking badly of me feels unbearable. Let's explore that, the therapist suggested. What specifically makes it feel unbearable? Sarah was quiet for a moment, really thinking. I guess I feel like if someone thinks badly of me, it means I've failed at being a good person. Like I should be able to make everyone like me, or at least not dislike me. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, Dr. Martinez observed. You're essentially saying you should be able to control other people's thoughts and feelings, which is impossible. Even the most likable people in the world have others who don't particularly care for them. It's part of being human. I know that logically, Sarah said, but emotionally it feels different when it's about me. Of course it does, the therapist validated. This is where we need to work on both the cognitive and behavioral aspects. Understanding something intellectually is just the first step. We need to give you experiences that help you feel this truth, not just know it. That's where the exposure work comes in. Can you give me an example of what that might look like? Sarah asked. Sure, Dr. Martinez replied. Let's say we're working on your fear of judgment in conversations. We might start by having you intentionally make a small mistake in a low-stakes interaction, maybe mispronouncing a word when ordering coffee, or asking a store employee where something is when the sign is clearly visible. The goal would be to see what actually happens versus what your anxiety predicts will happen. Sarah's eyes widened. Intentionally make a mistake? That sounds like my nightmare. Which is exactly why it's therapeutic, the therapist explained. Right now you're spending enormous energy trying to be perfect to avoid judgment. But perfection is impossible, so you're fighting a losing battle. By intentionally making small mistakes, you learn that they're survivable, that most people don't really care or even notice, and that even if someone does judge you momentarily, nothing terrible actually happens. I can see the logic, Sarah said slowly, but the thought of actually doing it makes my heart race. That's completely normal, Doctor, Martinez assured her. We'll work up to it gradually. We might start with just imagining the scenario, noticing what thoughts and feelings come up, and practicing coping strategies. Then maybe role-playing it here in the office where it's safe. Only when you feel ready would we try it in real life, and even then, you'd be in complete control. What kind of coping strategies? Sarah asked, seeming genuinely curious now. There are several we'll explore, the therapist replied. Breathing techniques to calm your physical anxiety response. Grounding exercises to keep you present instead of spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Thought-challenging techniques you can use in the moment, and something called cognitive diffusion. Learning to see your thoughts as just thoughts, not facts. Can we try one now? Sarah asked, surprising herself with the request. Absolutely, Dr. Martinez smiled. Let's start with a simple breathing technique. When we're anxious, we tend to breathe shallowly from our chest, which actually increases anxiety. Deep belly breathing activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest response, the opposite of fight or flight. The therapist guided Sarah through the technique, having her place one hand on her chest and one on her belly, breathing in slowly through her nose for 4 counts, holding for 4, and exhaling through her mouth for 6 counts. After a few rounds, Sarah noticeably relaxed. How do you feel? Dr. Martinez asked. Calmer, Sarah admitted. It's like my body slowed down a bit. That's exactly what happened, the therapist confirmed. You just proved to yourself that you have some control over your anxiety response. It might not eliminate anxiety completely, but it can turn the volume down enough for you to think more clearly. I like that metaphor, turning the volume down, Sarah said. Sometimes it feels like my anxiety is screaming at me. And when someone's screaming at you, it's hard to think rationally, Dr. Martinez agreed. That's why we practice these techniques when you're calm, so they become automatic when you need them. It's like building a fire escape. You don't wait until there's a fire to figure out the exit route. Sarah nodded. That makes sense. So what would a typical week look like if I'm doing this therapy? We'd meet weekly, at least initially, the therapist explained. In our sessions, we'd review the previous week, identify patterns, learn new techniques, and practice them together. Between sessions, you'd have homework, not busy work, but specific exercises to practice what we've learned. You might keep a thought journal, noting situations that trigger anxiety and the thoughts that come up. You might practice breathing exercises daily, and gradually we'd introduce behavioral experiments, those small challenges we talked about. It sounds like a lot of work, Sarah observed. It is work, Doctor, Martinez acknowledged. But think about how much energy you're already spending on anxiety, avoiding situations, worrying about what might happen, criticizing yourself afterward. We're redirecting that energy toward healing instead of maintaining the problem. Sarah seemed to consider this. I never thought about how exhausting the avoidance is. Sometimes I'm more tired from avoiding something than I would have been from just doing it. That's a crucial insight, the therapist noted. Avoidance takes tremendous energy and it reinforces the fear. Every time we avoid something, we're telling our brain that it was right to be afraid, that we couldn't handle it. But when we face things gradually, we build evidence that we're more capable than anxiety tells us. What if I'm in a situation and I just can't handle it? Sarah asked. Like what if I try to give a presentation and I have to leave? Then we'd explore what happened without judgment, Dr. Martinez replied. We'd look at what thoughts came up, what you felt in your body, what specifically felt overwhelming. Then we'd adjust our approach. Maybe we need more practice with smaller groups first, or maybe we need to work more on certain coping strategies. It's all useful information. You keep saying that, useful information. It's so different from how I think about it, Sarah reflected. To me it always feels like proof of failure. That black and white thinking is another cognitive distortion, the therapist explained. Success or failure, good or bad, competent or incompetent. But life is mostly grey areas. You can give a presentation that has some strong parts and some areas for improvement. You can be liked by some people and not others. You can handle some social situations well and struggle with others. That's not failure. That's being human. Sarah smiled slightly. My therapist in college used to say I was a perfectionist, but I never really understood what that meant because I don't feel perfect at anything. Perfectionism isn't about being perfect, Dr. Martinez clarified. It's about believing you should be perfect and beating yourself up when you're not. It's setting impossible standards and then feeling like a failure when you don't meet them. Sound familiar? Painfully familiar, Sarah admitted. So how do I stop? We start by noticing it, the therapist said. You can't change something you're not aware of, so we'll work on catching that perfectionist voice when it pipes up. Then we'll practice responding to it differently. Instead of, I should be able to do this perfectly, maybe I'm learning and it's okay to make mistakes. Instead of, everyone must like me, perhaps, some people will like me and others won't, and that's normal. Those feel so foreign to say, Sarah noted. They will at first, Dr. Martinez agreed. You've been practicing the other thoughts for years, maybe decades. These new thoughts are like learning a new language. At first, you have to think about every word, translate in your head. But with practice, it becomes more natural. How long does it usually take, Sarah asked, to feel better, I mean? That varies from person to person, the therapist replied honestly. Some people notice improvements in a few weeks, especially in their awareness and understanding of their patterns. Behavioral changes often take a bit longer, maybe a few months. But it's not a linear process. You'll have good days and harder days. The overall trajectory is what matters. What about medication? Sarah asked. My doctor mentioned it might help. Medication can be helpful for some people with social anxiety, Dr. Martinez said. It can lower the overall anxiety level, making it easier to engage in therapy and practice new behaviors, but it's not necessary for everyone. Some people do well with therapy alone, others benefit from combination treatment. It's a personal decision you'd make with your doctor. Sarah nodded. I think I want to try therapy first and see how it goes. That's perfectly reasonable, the therapist affirmed. You can always reconsider later if you feel you need additional support. Now, let's talk about a specific technique called thought challenging that you can start using right away. Dr. Martinez pulled out a worksheet. This is a thought record. When you notice anxiety coming up in a social situation, you'll write down the situation, your automatic thoughts, the emotions you felt, and their intensity from 1 to 10. Then you'll examine the evidence for and against the thought, come up with a more balanced thought, and rate your emotions again. Can we do an example? Sarah asked. Of course. Let's use a hypothetical situation. Imagine you're at a work meeting and you want to share an idea but you're holding back. What thoughts might come up? The therapist prompted. Sarah responded quickly, clearly familiar with this scenario. My idea is probably stupid. Everyone will think I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stumble over my words. They'll all stare at me. Good. Those are the automatic thoughts, Dr. Martinez said, writing them down. And emotions? Anxiety, definitely. Maybe an 8 out of 10. Also embarrassment, even though nothing's happened yet. Maybe a 7. And shame, like a 6, Sarah listed. Excellent awareness, the therapist noted. Now let's take the thought. My idea is probably stupid. Evidence for? Sarah thought. Well, I'm newer to the team than most people, and I don't have as much experience in this specific area. Okay, an evidence against, Dr. Martinez prompted. I was hired for my expertise in related areas. I've had good ideas in past jobs that were implemented successfully. My boss specifically asked everyone to contribute ideas, so she wants to hear different perspectives, Sarah said, seeming surprised by how much counter-evidence she could find. Now, what's a more balanced thought? The therapist asked. Sarah considered. Maybe. My idea might not be perfect, but it could contribute something valuable to the discussion, and sharing it is how I learn and grow in this role. That's wonderful, Doctor, Martinez said. How do you feel when you think that thought instead? Still anxious, but maybe a 5 instead of 8, and less ashamed. Maybe the embarrassment goes down too, because I'm not assuming it'll go badly, Sarah reflected. You just did cognitive restructuring, the therapist pointed out. You took an anxiety-driven thought and examined it objectively, finding a more balanced perspective. With practice, this becomes quicker and more automatic. It felt different than just telling myself not to worry, Sarah observed, more like actually investigating whether my worry makes sense. Exactly, Dr. Martinez confirmed. You're not dismissing your feelings or pretending everything's fine. You're examining whether your thoughts are accurate and helpful. Sometimes anxiety points out real problems we need to address. But with social anxiety, it's usually exaggerating or catastrophizing. What about the physical symptoms? Sarah asked. Sometimes even when I try to think differently, my body's still in panic mode. My heart races, I sweat, my voice shakes. Those physical symptoms are real and can be very distressing, the therapist validated. We'll work on those too. Besides breathing exercises, there's progressive muscle relaxation, where you learn to release tension from your body. There's also something called interoceptive exposure, where we deliberately bring on physical sensations similar to anxiety in a controlled way. Why would we want to do that? Sarah asked, looking concerned. Because right now, those physical sensations probably scare you, Dr. Martinez explained. You feel your heart race and think, oh no, Everyone can tell I'm anxious. This is terrible. But if we practice bringing on those sensations safely, maybe by running in place to increase heart rate or spinning to feel dizzy, you learn that the sensations themselves aren't dangerous. They're uncomfortable but not harmful. That's true, Sarah admitted. Sometimes the fear of looking anxious makes me more anxious than the actual situation. It's anxiety about anxiety, the therapist agreed. We call it meta-anxiety. You're anxious about being anxious, worried about worrying. It creates layers of distress. By accepting that some anxiety is normal and not dangerous, we can strip away those extra layers. How do I accept anxiety when it feels so awful? Sarah asked. Acceptance doesn't mean liking it or wanting it, Dr. Martinez clarified. It means acknowledging it's there without fighting it or running from it. Think of anxiety like a wave in the ocean. You can try to run from it, but it'll knock you over. You can try to stand rigid against it, but it'll still knock you over. Or you can dive through it or float over it, working with it rather than against it. Sarah seemed to ponder this metaphor. I've definitely been trying to run from it or fight it. Most people do, the therapist said. It's a natural response. But paradoxically, the more we fight anxiety, the stronger it gets. When we can say, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, that's uncomfortable but not dangerous. Let me use my coping tools. It often starts to decrease. It sounds almost too simple, Sarah said skeptically. Simple doesn't mean easy, Dr. Martinez pointed out. The concepts are straightforward, but putting them into practice when your alarm system is going off takes courage and persistence. That's why we practice in small steps, building your confidence gradually. What happens if I do all this and still have social anxiety? Sarah asked, voicing a fear that had been lurking. First, let's examine that thought, the therapist suggested. You're already catastrophizing about treatment not working before we've really started. But to answer your question, most people see significant improvement with CBT for social anxiety. If you're one of the minority who doesn't respond as well, we'd explore why. Maybe we need a different approach, or maybe there are other factors we need to address. But worrying about treatment not working can become a self-fulfilling prophecy if it prevents you from fully engaging. Sarah nodded. You're right. I'm already looking for the exit before I've committed to being here. That's your anxiety trying to protect you from disappointment, Dr. Martinez observed. If you don't really try, you can't really fail, right? But that also means you can't succeed. Part of our work will be taking calculated risks, including the risk of hoping things can be different. Hope feels dangerous, Sarah admitted quietly. I understand, the therapist said gently. When you've been disappointed before, hope can feel like setting yourself up for pain. But without hope, change is impossible. We're not talking about blind optimism, but realistic hope based on the fact that many people with social anxiety have found relief through these methods. Can you tell me about someone who got better? Sarah asked. Without breaking confidentiality, obviously. I can share a composite example, Doctor, Martinez offered. I worked with someone who couldn't eat in public because they were terrified of people watching them, judging how they ate, potentially seeing them spill something. They'd turn down lunch invitations, skip work events with food, eat in their car. Through gradual exposure, starting with eating a granola bar in a park where people might see them from a distance, working up to eating lunch in increasingly busy places, they overcame this fear. Last I heard, they were regularly organizing team lunches at work. That's amazing, Sarah said. I can't imagine being the one organizing social events. They couldn't either when we started, the therapist noted. Change happens incrementally. You don't go from avoiding to organizing overnight. There are many small victories along the way. What would be a small victory for me? Sarah wondered aloud. That depends on your specific goals, Doctor, Martinez replied. What would feel like progress to you? Sarah thought about it. Being able to speak up in meetings without obsessing about it for hours beforehand and hours afterward. Going to social events and actually enjoying them instead of white-knuckling through. Having a conversation without constantly monitoring myself and worrying about saying the wrong thing. Those are great goals, the therapist affirmed. Let's break them down even further. For meetings, a small victory might be asking one clarifying question. For social events, it might be staying for 30 minutes without checking your phone as an escape. For conversations, it might be allowing one moment of silence without rushing to fill it. Those do feel more manageable, Sarah agreed. That's the key, Doctor. Martinez explained. We want to set you up for success, not failure. Each small victory builds evidence that you can handle social situations, which challenges the anxiety's narrative that you can't. What about setbacks? Sarah asked. What if I do well for a while and then have a really bad day? Setbacks are part of the process, the therapist normalized. They're not failures, they're learning opportunities. Maybe you discover that certain situations are harder when you're tired or stressed. Maybe you realize you need to practice certain coping skills more. Recovery isn't a straight line upward. It's more like a general upward trend with peaks and valleys. Sarah seemed relieved by this. I always think if I mess up once, I'm back to square one. That all or nothing thinking again, Dr. Martinez pointed out. If you practice speaking up in meetings for a month and then have one meeting where you don't, you haven't lost that month of practice. Those positive experiences still happened. Your brain still formed new neural pathways. One difficult day doesn't erase progress. Neural pathways? Sarah asked with interest. Yes, CBT actually changes your brain, the therapist explained. When you repeatedly practice new thoughts and behaviors, you're creating new neural pathways. The old anxiety pathways don't disappear immediately, but the new ones get stronger with use. It's like walking through a field. The first time you have to push through tall grass. But the more you walk that path, the clearer it becomes, until eventually it's easier to take the new path than the old one. So I'm literally rewiring my brain, Sarah asked, seeming fascinated by this idea. Exactly, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Neuroplasticity means our brains can change throughout our lives. You're not stuck with social anxiety forever just because you have it now. Your brain is capable of learning new patterns. That's actually really encouraging, Sarah said. It makes it feel less like something's wrong with me, and more like I just learned unhelpful patterns that I can unlearn. That's a perfect way to think about it, the therapist agreed. Social anxiety often develops from a combination of factors, maybe genetic sensitivity, early experiences, learned behaviors. But regardless of how it developed, you can learn new ways of thinking and responding. Sarah glanced at the clock and seemed surprised. I can't believe the hour is almost up. This went by much faster than I expected. How are you feeling about everything we've discussed? Dr. Martinez asked. Overwhelmed but hopeful, Sarah replied honestly. It's a lot to take in, but it makes sense. And for the first time, I feel like maybe things could actually be different. That's a wonderful place to start, the therapist said. For this week, I'd like you to just notice your thoughts in social situations. Don't try to change them yet. Just observe them like a scientist gathering data. Write them down if you can. We'll review them next week and start practicing thought challenging. I can do that, Sarah agreed. Just observe. Don't judge. Exactly. And remember, even coming to this session today was facing a social fear. You did it, and nothing terrible happened. That's already evidence against your anxiety's predictions, Dr. Martinez pointed out. Sarah smiled, a genuine smile this time. You're right. I was terrified to come, but here I am, and it was actually helpful. As Sarah left the office, Dr. Martinez made some notes. The prognosis was good. Sarah showed insight, motivation, and readiness for change. The work ahead wouldn't be easy, but with commitment and practice, she could reclaim her life from social anxiety. The following week, Sarah arrived 5 minutes early instead of sitting in the parking lot. Progress already. She settled into the chair with noticeably less tension than the previous week. "How was your week?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Interesting," Sarah replied. "I never realized how many thoughts I have in social situations. I filled up half a notebook just from 3 days of observation." "That's excellent dedication," the therapist noted. "What patterns did you notice?" Sarah pulled out her notebook. "A lot of mind reading. I'm constantly assuming I know what others are thinking, and it's always negative. Also, fortune telling, predicting things will go badly before they even happen, and so much comparing myself to others, always coming up short." "You've identified 3 major cognitive distortions," Dr. Martinez observed. "Mind reading, fortune telling, and comparison. How did it feel to notice these patterns?" "At first frustrating. I couldn't believe how mean I am to myself. But then it became almost interesting, like watching my anxiety from the outside instead of being consumed by it," Sarah explained. "That's exactly the shift we want," the therapist said. "You're developing what we call metacognition, awareness of your own thinking. When you can observe your thoughts rather than automatically believing them, you gain choice in how to respond." "There was one situation that really stood out," Sarah continued. "I was in the break room at work and a colleague came in. My immediate thought was, she thinks I'm awkward, I should leave. But then I noticed the thought and stayed to observe what actually happened. She made her coffee, we exchanged pleasantries about the weather, and she left. It was completely normal, nothing like what my anxiety predicted." "That's a powerful observation," Dr. Martinez highlighted. "You conducted your own behavioral experiment without even planning to. What did you learn from it?" "That my predictions are often wrong," Sarah said. "And that even when I feel awkward, it doesn't mean I appear awkward to others or that they're judging me." "Let's build on that," the therapist suggested. "This week I'd like you to continue observing your thoughts, but also start challenging them using the thought record we discussed. Pick 1 or 2 situations where you notice strong anxiety and work through the evidence for and against your anxious thoughts." "I can try that," Sarah agreed. "Actually, there's something coming up that I'm already dreading. My department is having a lunch meeting on Friday. Usually I eat at my desk and just join virtually for the discussion part. But my boss specifically asked everyone to attend in person. That sounds like a perfect opportunity to practice, Dr. Martinez said. Let's work through it together now. What thoughts come up when you think about this lunch meeting?" Sarah's shoulders tensed slightly. "Everyone will notice if I spill something or eat messily. They'll think I'm gross. I won't know what to talk about during the casual eating part. People will think I'm boring or weird. What if I need to use the bathroom but feel too anxious to excuse myself?" "Okay, let's take these one at a time," the therapist suggested. "The thought about spilling or eating messily. Have you ever actually spilled food at a work event?" "Once, about 2 years ago, I knocked over my water glass," Sarah admitted. "And what happened?" Dr. Martinez prompted. "People helped clean it up. Someone said it happens to everyone. The meeting continued," Sarah recalled. "So the actual consequence was people being helpful and understanding. How does that compare to your prediction of being judged as gross?" the therapist asked. Sarah considered this. "It doesn't match at all. I built it up in my head as this huge humiliation, but really it was a minor inconvenience that people were nice about." "What about observing others?" Dr. Martinez suggested. "In your years of work meetings, have you seen other people spill things or eat messily?" "Actually, yes," Sarah said, seeming surprised by the memory. "My manager got salad dressing on his shirt last month. Everyone laughed, including him, and then we moved on. I didn't think he was gross. So you have evidence that spills happen, they're handled with humour and kindness, and they don't define how people see each other, therapist summarised. Now, what's a more balanced thought about eating at the meeting? Sarah took a breath. Maybe. Eating in front of others feels uncomfortable for me, but people are focused on their own food and conversation, not scrutinising how I eat. If something minor happens, it'll be handled gracefully and forgotten quickly. Excellent reframe, Dr. Martinez praised. How does that thought feel compared to the original? Less catastrophic, Sarah admitted. Still nervous, but not paralysed. That's the goal, the therapist explained. We're not trying to eliminate all anxiety, just bring it down to a manageable level where you can still function. Now, what about the fear of not knowing what to talk about? That one's harder, Sarah said. I always blank out in social conversations. Everyone else seems to know exactly what to say, and I'm just standing there awkwardly. Let's examine that belief that everyone else knows exactly what to say, Dr. Martinez suggested. Have you ever noticed anyone else seeming uncomfortable in social conversation? Sarah thought about it. Actually, there's another woman in my department who's pretty quiet, and sometimes I see people checking their phones a lot during social times, which might be their way of avoiding conversation. So you're not the only one who finds casual conversation challenging, the therapist noted. What topics do people usually discuss at these lunches? Work projects, weekend plans, TV shows, sometimes complaints about traffic or weather, Sarah listed. Do you have thoughts or experiences related to any of those topics? Dr. Martinez asked. Well, yes. I just started watching a new series on Netflix, and I'm working on an interesting project. I guess I do have things I could talk about, Sarah realised. The anxiety makes you forget that you have things to contribute, the therapist observed. It's like it creates a blank slate in your mind. What if you prepared a few conversation topics beforehand just as a backup? Like a social script, Sarah asked. More like conversation insurance, Dr. Martinez suggested. You might not need it, but knowing it's there reduces anxiety. You could think of 2 or 3 things you could mention if there's a lull. Your Netflix show, a question about someone else's project, an observation about something neutral like the weather or a local event. That would help, Sarah agreed. Just having something in my back pocket would make me feel less panicked about dead silence. Let's also talk about your assumption that silence equals awkwardness, the therapist continued. In reality, all conversations have natural pauses. They're only awkward if we label them that way. Sometimes silence just means people are eating or thinking. I never thought about it that way, Sarah said. I always rush to fill any silence, which probably makes me seem more anxious than if I just let it be. Exactly, Dr. Martinez confirmed. This week, try noticing natural silences in conversations where you're more comfortable, maybe with family or close friends. Notice how they're actually not problematic unless someone makes them so. What about the bathroom issue? Sarah asked, blushing slightly. I know it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes I get so anxious about drawing attention to myself by leaving that I just suffer through being uncomfortable. It doesn't sound ridiculous at all, the therapist assured her. This is about fear of judgment for normal human needs. Let me ask you, when someone excuses themselves from a meeting to use the restroom, what do you think? Nothing really. Or maybe I'm glad because then I feel like I can go too if I need to, Sarah admitted. So you don't judge them as weak or disruptive? Dr. Martinez asked. No, never. It's just normal, Sarah said, then caught herself. Oh, I see what you're doing. I don't judge others for things I'm certain they'll judge me for. That double standard is so common with social anxiety, the therapist explained. You extend understanding to others that you don't give yourself. What if you tried applying the same compassion to yourself that you naturally give to others? That feels really hard, Sarah said, like I haven't earned it somehow. Let's examine that, Dr. Martinez suggested. What would you need to do to earn basic human compassion? Sarah struggled with this. I don't know. Be perfect, never make mistakes, always say the right thing. And is that standard you'd apply to others before showing them compassion? The therapist asked. No, of course not. That would be cruel, Sarah said, then paused. Oh, I'm being cruel to myself. You're holding yourself to impossible standards that you'd never apply to anyone else, Dr. Martinez reflected. This self-criticism actually maintains your social anxiety. When you're constantly harsh with yourself, you assume others will be harsh too. So how do I stop? Sarah asked. I've been doing this for so long, I don't know how else to be. We start small, the therapist said. This week, when you notice self-critical thoughts, try asking yourself, would I say this to a friend? If not, try rephrasing it as you would for someone you care about. Instead of, I'm so stupid for not knowing what to say. Maybe, I'm having a hard time with conversation right now and that's okay. It feels almost wrong to be nice to myself, Sarah admitted. That's how you know it's important to practice, Dr. Martinez pointed out. The things that feel wrong or uncomfortable are often the things that challenge our anxiety the most. Speaking of which, let's talk about an exposure exercise for this week. Sarah shifted nervously. Okay, what did you have in mind? Given that you have the lunch meeting on Friday, that's already a natural exposure, but I'd like to add some structure to it. First, arrive 5 minutes early instead of right on time. This gives you a chance to settle in rather than walking into a full room. Second, ask at least one question during the casual conversation. It can be as simple as, how's your day going? Or, what are you having for lunch? Third, if you need the restroom, excuse yourself and go, even if the timing isn't perfect, the therapist outlined. Those all sound terrifying, Sarah said with a nervous laugh. Let's scale it then, Dr. Martinez offered. What feels like a stretch but not impossible? Sarah thought. I could arrive early, and I could ask one question, especially if I prepare it ahead of time. The bathroom thing. Maybe only if I really need to, not as an experiment. Perfect, the therapist agreed. We want to challenge you, not overwhelm you. After the lunch, write down what actually happened versus what you predicted would happen. Pay special attention to any evidence that contradicts your anxious predictions. Like people being nice when I thought they'd be judgmental, Sarah suggested. Exactly. Or conversations flowing more naturally than expected. Or realizing that other people also seem nervous or awkward at times. We're gathering evidence that social situations aren't as dangerous as your anxiety tells you, Dr. Martinez explained. I'm also curious, the therapist continued, about where these fears might have originated. Can you remember when social anxiety first became a problem for you? Sarah reflected. Middle school, definitely. I was always shy, but it got worse when I changed schools in 7th grade. I didn't know anyone, and there was this incident where I tried to join a group at lunch and they laughed at something I said. Not mean-spirited maybe, but I was mortified. After that, I ate alone in the library. That sounds like a formative experience, Dr. Martinez observed. A vulnerable moment where you took a social risk and experienced what felt like rejection. How do you think that 12-year-old Sarah interpreted that experience? That I didn't fit in, that there was something wrong with me, that it was safer to be alone than risk humiliation, Sarah said quietly. And those beliefs have been running in the background ever since, the therapist noted. But let's think about this. You were 12, in a new environment, trying to navigate complex social dynamics that are challenging for everyone at that age. Was the conclusion that you're fundamentally flawed really accurate? Probably not, Sarah admitted. Middle school is hard for everyone, and looking back, those kids probably forgot about it 5 minutes later while I've been carrying it for 15 years. You've been living by rules that a hurt 12-year-old created to protect herself, Dr. Martinez reflected. Those rules might have felt necessary then, but are they serving adult you well? No, Sarah said firmly, they're keeping me isolated and miserable. So part of our work is updating those old beliefs with new information, the therapist explained. You're not 12 anymore. You have adult social skills, professional accomplishments, and the ability to handle complex situations. But your anxiety is still operating from that middle school playbook. That actually makes so much sense, Sarah said. Sometimes I feel like a scared kid in adult situations. Because that's exactly what's happening emotionally, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Your adult self knows how to handle a work lunch, but your anxious 12-year-old self is screaming that it's not safe. We need to help that younger part of you understand that you've grown and developed resources you didn't have then. How do we do that? Sarah asked. Through new experiences that contradict the old beliefs, the therapist explained. Every time you take a social risk and survive it, even thrive in it, you're showing that inner 12-year-old that the world isn't as dangerous as she thinks. You're literally updating your internal model of social reality. It's strange to think of it that way, but it makes sense, Sarah said. Like I'm stuck in the past in some ways. Not stuck, Doctor, Martinez corrected gently. More like visiting the past repeatedly. But you can choose to stay in the present instead. When you notice those old fears coming up, you can remind yourself, that was then, this is now. I have resources and abilities I didn't have before. Sarah nodded, seeming to integrate this information. There's something else I wanted to ask about. Sometimes my anxiety seems worse at certain times. Like, some days I can handle social situations better than others. Is that normal? Absolutely, the therapist assured her. Anxiety isn't static, it's influenced by many factors. Sleep, stress, hormones, general health, other life events. Have you noticed any patterns? It's definitely worse when I'm tired or stressed about other things, Sarah observed. And sometimes right before my period, my anxiety goes through the roof. Those are important observations, Dr. Martinez noted. When we're depleted in any way, we have fewer resources to manage anxiety. It's like your anxiety fighting battery is lower. On those days, you might need to be extra compassionate with yourself and maybe scale back your exposure challenges. So it's okay to have harder days, Sarah asked. Of course, the therapist confirmed. Recovery isn't about never having anxiety. It's about developing tools to manage it and not letting it control your life. Some days will be harder than others, and that's completely normal. That's relieving to hear, Sarah said. I always think if I have a bad day, it means I'm not getting better. Let's add that to your list of cognitive distortions, Dr. Martinez suggested with a smile. All or nothing thinking about recovery itself. Progress includes ups and downs. The general trend is what matters. I'm starting to see how these thinking patterns affect everything, not just social situations, Sarah reflected. That's often the case, the therapist agreed. The skills you're learning here will help in many areas of life. Challenging distorted thoughts, facing fears gradually, being compassionate with yourself. These are universally useful skills. Sarah glanced at the clock. Before we run out of time, can we talk about something specific? Phone calls. I absolutely hate them. I'll email someone rather than call even when calling would be quicker. Is that something we can work on? Definitely, Dr. Martinez replied. Phone anxiety is very common with social anxiety. You lose visual cues, can't see the other person's reactions, and feel pressure to respond immediately without time to think. What specifically worries you about phone calls? Not knowing when to talk, interrupting or being interrupted, awkward silences, not being able to see if the person is annoyed or in a hurry, Sarah listed rapidly. Those are all valid concerns, the therapist validated. Let's create a hierarchy for phone calls. What would be the easiest phone-related task? Sarah thought. Maybe listening to a voicemail. I can do that, though I still don't like it. And what would be harder? Dr. Martinez prompted. Leaving a voicemail for someone I don't know well, answering when I don't recognize the number, making a call to someone I don't know, like customer service, and the hardest would be calling someone I know professionally but not well, like a colleague from another department, Sarah detailed. Excellent hierarchy, the therapist noted. We could start with you calling automated systems, where you just have to press numbers, no talking required. Then maybe calling a store to ask their hours, a brief scripted interaction, gradually working up to more complex calls. Even thinking about it makes me anxious, Sarah admitted. Which tells us it's an important area to work on, Dr. Martinez pointed out. Avoidance is maintaining that fear, but we'll go at your pace. You might start by just holding the phone and imagining making a call, noticing what thoughts and feelings come up. That I can probably do, Sarah agreed. Good. For this week, along with your lunch meeting exposure and thought challenging, I'd like you to make one phone-related goal. It could be as simple as listening to voicemails within an hour of receiving them instead of putting it off, or calling an automated system. Choose something that feels like a small stretch, the therapist suggested. I'll try the automated system, Sarah decided. Maybe check my bank balance by phone instead of online. Perfect, Dr. Martinez said. Remember, the goal isn't to feel no anxiety. It's to feel the anxiety and do it anyway, proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort. Feel the fear and do it anyway, Sarah repeated. I like that. It's different from trying not to feel afraid. Exactly, the therapist confirmed. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling afraid and taking action anyway. Every time you do that, you're being incredibly brave, even if it doesn't feel that way. Sarah smiled. I never thought of myself as brave before. Facing your fears every day, coming to therapy, working on difficult changes, that takes tremendous courage, Dr. Martinez reflected. Start recognizing your bravery. It's another way to challenge that critical inner voice. As the session wrapped up, Sarah gathered her things with more confidence than the previous week. I have a lot to work on, but I feel like I have actual tools now, not just worry. You're doing excellent work, the therapist affirmed. Remember, if you enjoy this soothing CBT session, please like the video, subscribe to Mind Detox and ring the notification bell and write in comments from which country you're watching this video. Be patient with yourself this week. Change takes time, but you're already on the path. Sarah left feeling hopeful and armed with specific strategies. The lunch meeting on Friday still loomed, but now it felt like a challenge she could face rather than a catastrophe to avoid. Over the next several weeks, Sarah continued her CBT journey, each session built on the last, adding new techniques and insights. She learned about safety behaviors, the subtle things she did to feel safer in social situations that actually maintained her anxiety, like always positioning herself near exits or checking her phone to avoid conversation. She practiced dropping these behaviors gradually. She discovered the concept of post-event processing, the tendency to ruminate on social interactions afterward, analyzing every detail for signs of failure. Dr. Martinez taught her to limit this review to 5 minutes, writing down any actual evidence of problems versus anxious interpretations, then deliberately redirecting her attention. I realized I was spending hours dissecting conversations that the other person probably forgot immediately, Sarah reported in one session. All that analysis was just feeding my anxiety for next time. They worked on assertiveness training, helping Sarah express her needs and opinions without aggressive overcompensation or passive withdrawal. Role-playing exercises in session helped her practice different scenarios. Let's try the situation where someone interrupts you in a meeting, Dr. Martinez suggested during one session. I'll interrupt, and you practice different ways of continuing your point. At first, Sarah would simply stop talking when interrupted, but gradually she learned to say things like, "Let me just finish this thought," or, "I'd like to complete my point, then I'd love to hear your perspective." "It feels so rude to keep talking," Sarah initially protested. "Is it rude when others do it to you?" the therapist challenged. "No, I actually respect when people stand their ground," Sarah admitted, recognizing another double standard. They explored the role of perfectionism more deeply. Sarah discovered that her fear of judgment was tied to an impossible standard she set for herself, that she should never make mistakes, never be disliked, never cause even minor inconvenience to others. "What would happen if you lowered your standards to being a regular, imperfect human?" Dr. Martinez asked during one session. "It feels like giving up," Sarah replied honestly. "Like if I'm not trying to be perfect, I'm not trying at all." That's the all-or-nothing thinking again, the therapist pointed out. There's a huge middle ground between perfection and failure. What if you aimed for good enough instead of perfect? This concept was revolutionary for Sarah. They practiced applying good enough standards to various situations. A presentation didn't need to be flawless. It needed to convey key information clearly. A conversation didn't need to be brilliant. It needed to be genuine and reasonably connected. The exposure exercises gradually intensified. Sarah practiced making small mistakes intentionally, mispronouncing a word when ordering coffee, asking for directions to something clearly marked, wearing mismatched socks to work where they'd barely be visible but she would know. "The first time I deliberately mispronounced latte at the coffee shop, I wanted to immediately correct myself," Sarah reported. "But the barista just repeated it back correctly and moved on. No judgment, no weird looks. It was actually anticlimactic." "Anticlimactic is perfect," Dr. Martinez responded. "Your anxiety promises disaster, but reality is usually mundane. Most people are too focused on their own lives to scrutinize yours." They addressed the physical symptoms of anxiety through interoceptive exposure. In session, they practiced exercises that mimicked anxiety symptoms, breathing through a straw to create shortness of breath, spinning in a chair to induce dizziness, running in place to elevate heart rate. "This is so weird," Sarah said after the first exercise. "I have all the physical feelings of anxiety, but I know why, so I'm not actually anxious about them." "Exactly," the therapist confirmed. "You're learning that physical sensations aren't dangerous. They're just sensations